What's up, everyone? Welcome to this week's live interview in the Grow Your Midterm Rental Business group. Each week, I'm going to be interviewing midterm rental hosts from across the country to talk about everything to do with midterm rentals, rental arbitrage, co-hosting, and just real estate in general. We already have some really amazing guests lined up for the next upcoming weeks, and I especially have an awesome guest lined up for today. Today, we have Jonah Christakis. Jonah is only 23 years old. And he started his journey in the midterm rental industry just last year. He secured his first midterm rental property just 10 months ago. And since then, he's already rapidly expanded his portfolio and is now managing 13 units through a combination of rental arbitrage and co-hosting, and he's managing them all as midterm rentals. So obviously, Jonah is an action taker. His story especially hits home to me because it is actually quite similar to my own story, but he's actually one of my first ever coaching students. So Jonah, thanks so much for hopping on the call today, and I'm really happy to have you here.
Thanks, Christian. Happy to be here.
My pleasure, dude. So Jonah, tell us a little bit about your journey. You're now managing 13 midterm rental units. How did you do it? How did you get here today?
Yeah, when I graduated high school in 2020, it's like during COVID, I got into like investing, wanted to get into real estate. I found some people that were interested in real estate and just went to all these networking meetups, Bigger Pockets. It's where I met Christian. And I eventually found someone that was struggling with a multifamily house they had in the suburbs here in Buffalo, New York. And I just told them that I've been reading and listening to these books and doing research on real estate, and I can help you out. And I started off just working, basically doing like property management stuff for this guy for free. Just told him I'll do it for free. Like I'll clean up your systems and make things more smooth, help him out with listings and just get better tenants. And so I did that for about a year, maybe a year and a half. And I kept seeing Christian at these meetups, and he kept telling me about this arbitrage model, and I thought it was so interesting. And every time I saw him, I'd pick his brain about it. And then eventually, I kind of did the same thing with Christian. I think it was probably last year around this time. I just sent a message to Christian like, "Hey, if you ever need any help with anything, would love to help you out. Like, if it's like building beds or whatever you need, like, let me just come and work for you for free." And then Christian's like, "Cool, like, come over." And then I was like raking leaves for Christian. I was just like, "What do you need?" Raking leaves. And it's like, it was crazy. Like I never really done something like that before, just like raking leaves. And then eventually like I helped them make some beds and stuff like that. And I eventually converted that one owner that I was helping out. I converted that into a midterm rental with the arbitrage model, and I sublet that property from that landlord on a 12-month lease that's coming up in July here, and we already extended. From there, I just kind of rapidly expanded. It just got more arbitrage ones and eventually went into some co-hosting.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. Yeah, so if you haven't realized, Jonah's actually local. He's also in Buffalo, New York. And what's different about Jonah for me is that I've had a lot of people that reach out to me and like, "Oh, the arbitrage thing is really interesting that you're doing. Oh, the midterm rental, people like are like interested, I guess, in what I'm doing." And I've had lots of people that like ask me like, "Oh, hey, could I take you out for a coffee?" or like, "Could I pick your brain?" or this and that, right? And for a while I would like go and I would do it. It would be old like high school buddies or whatever. Like high school buddies will hit you up and be like, "Oh, like, hey, like I want to hear about this Airbnb stuff you're doing. I'm thinking about doing it," right? And the difference with you, Jonah, is that almost every single time that I would like set some time aside, I'd meet up with some buddy, some guy that would be like interested in doing midterm rentals. I'd tell them literally everything. I'd tell them everything that I'm doing, how I do it. Like it literally just get like, I don't care. I tell them everything, right? And like I would talk to that same person a couple weeks later, a month later, and guess what they have done? Like absolutely nothing, right? Like fucking nothing. Super range, but seriously. Um, so what was really cool with you, Jonah, is like you first of all, you reached out to me, I think, a couple times because at first I was kind of like, yeah. And but you were persistent, right? So you followed up and you're like, hey man, like I really want to learn about this, blah blah blah. Can we please go and do coffee, right? So I said, all right, sure, fine, whatever, right? And we did coffee, we had I think a great conversation. But what was different about you is that one, you offered to actually help me out and do stuff for free, which at the time I think I actually needed could like I needed the help. It was nice, right? So you were like assembling furniture for me and just like you said, building beds and raking leaves and doing stupid things for me. And then the whole time you would just be like asking me questions and nonstop, right? But then what was actually really different, Jonah, is that you actually went and like did the stuff that you actually went and took action and did the things, right? Where I think like you called me like a month or two later and said, "Hey, yeah, like I've got a guy like I have this guy that I've been managing a property for. He's ready to do midterms. He's interested. What do I do now?" And I was like, "Oh, awesome, really cool." So kudos to you, man, for taking action and actually doing the work. Because like I said, I've had lots of people that reach out to me, right? And no matter what I tell them or how much like info I feel like I give them, um, most of them don't end up taking action. So kudos to you for that. So Jonah, I know you do a mix of arbitrage and co-hosting, and you've kind of got a mix of properties. What is your portfolio consist of, and what does your portfolio look like?
Yeah, so I have 3 arbitrage properties. First one I got in July of last year, and then in November of last year, I got, my 3rd arbitrage deal, and then from there, I kinda pivoted towards co-hosting. It seemed easier to scale, and it takes some of the liability and responsibility away from you. You might make less money, um, but I decided that could be a better opportunity for me for those particular properties. So I have 10 co-hosting properties, and then I have 2 or 3 arbitrage properties for a total of 13.
Sweet. So 10 co-hosting, 3 arbitrage. And what do those properties look like? Are you doing mostly studios or 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms? What do you got going on?
Yeah, so the the arbitrage ones were in the suburbs, which there wasn't really many properties out there. So I think that was to my benefit because there are, even though they're far from the hospitals, there are people that don't want to be in the city, they want to be in the suburbs. The other properties are those are 1 bedrooms in a studio, and then the properties that I have in the city, there's 10 or 1 arbitrage and 10 co-hosting ones. Those are a mix of 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, have some 1 bedrooms. I have a single family house, so kind of diverse, but they're mostly apartments or like multifamily houses, like duplexes, and then I have 1 carriage house and 1 single family house.
One single family. Oh, wow. Very cool. And so you're doing more co-hosting than you are arbitrage. And you mentioned on some of the reasons why. So, but could you explain in more detail why are you doing more co-hosting than you are arbitrage?
Yeah, I think it's because it feels a little bit more safe to do it because if the property you're not paying rent every month, and then it's it this whole operation is always kind of a partnership with the landlord and us. But with the co-hosting, it's even more of a partnership where the
Mm,
you are basically more are marketing the property and dealing with the tenants, and then the landlord is kind of involved as well. So it's more of a partnership. It feels a little bit more safe. You don't have to pay rent every month, and then you're making money off of the rental income that you are bringing in. So I think that's the main reason. I think another reason is I usually give two offers. I usually tell them I'll rent this property for 3 years for X amount on these terms, and I really lowball. I really like. I tell Christian sometimes, and he's like, "That's crazy," and so I'll tell them like I'll tell them a certain number of what terms I want, and then maybe they'll say no, and then I'll be like, "Well, what we can do is we can do more of a partnership. This is what it's going to take to get the property up there, and here's the split, and this is how it would work." And that is sometimes more attractive to the owner because they can make a little bit more money.
No, that's huge. I think where you are offering landlords two options. One, I can do, and by the way, guys, Jonah's a shark, so he will offer like to rent a landlord's property, but he's sending like a lowball offer, right? So he'll offer, I don't know what, like 10, 20, 30% below like fair market rent. Now he'll offer like a 3-year lease. Are you asking for like free month rent, like a free rent up front?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, two months
Yeah.
of free rent, no security
So you're asking
deposit.
for like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you're really sending a lowball offer, but then you're also saying, well, if you don't like that, I can co-host the property for you and just basically charge a commission basis. I'll manage the day-to-day stuff and just charge a commission based on what comes in. So that's something I never really did until I heard it from you. So that's actually, I think that's a really valuable thing, is to offer both options to landlords. Like, hey, either I'll arbitrage, and when you say this, depending on if you want to arbitrage it or not, like you can just kind of send a lowball offer, or you can say, I can co-host the property for you too. So I think that's huge, man. So very cool. Um, well, man, help me out. um, I don't have any other.
Yeah.
I don't have questions lined up for you, man.
Yeah, I think I usually go with whatever option I think I want more. So first I'll go with that option if it's arbitrage, and then if they don't agree to that, then I will give them the other option. But co-hosting's been great. I think um it's good, especially if the property's already furnished. There's landlords out there that have like short-term rentals where their properties are not performing for whatever reasoning, like their poor management, or a lot of it's like poor advertisements. It's just like really easy stuff. And these landlords are like um, maybe a little bit desperate, or they want other options. So I think that's the biggest thing. Like you have to find the owners that they need help, like their properties aren't
Mm,
performing or they have a vacancy problem, and those are the landlords that you want to reach out to. And um, you'll soon realize that those landlord or there's so many people out there that actually want to work with you. So
yeah,
sometimes it's not always you pitching to them; they actually are reaching out to you.
no, 100%. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of times you have landlords that might have actually a great property, but it's underperforming because either something's off with the marketing, or I mean, just haven't put in like the honestly just the research and the amount of work that it takes to become like a professional like midterm rental operator. I think someone like you or I, like, we've kind of obsessed ourselves over this like this industry and this business, and we've put in a lot of time that obviously most people just haven't or aren't willing to do. So if you can find landlords that have maybe a nice property and are trying the midterm or trying the short-term rental thing out and are underperforming, that's where I think you could come in and provide a lot of value as a co-host. One of the reasons, so it's funny, a lot of like one of the reasons that I actually didn't haven't done a lot of co-host in my portfolio is because one thing I struggled with at least a few years ago when I was starting in this business, and I did a couple co-hosting units in the beginning. I think I struggled with setting boundaries with the landlord, and it became really frustrating for me because when you are doing co-hosting, you essentially have two customers. You have the landlord basically as a customer, or you might call them a partner, but really they're kind of like a customer. And then you have the actual tenant that's staying in the properties as a customer. And I think for me, in the beginning, where I struggled with co-hosting was I struggled with like setting clear boundaries with the landlord, and just like letting them know exactly how everything is going to work, and exactly like my expectations of them, what to expect from me, and everything. And I just ended up like, man, I would have, for example, I had one landlord who would like, I remember specifically, he messaged me one time at like almost midnight, 11 p.m., 11:30 p.m. one night, because he didn't like the way that my cleaners made the bed in his property. And it was like, dude, I remember when he did that, I was like, dude, I'm firing this guy. And that was actually kind of when I started to shift away from co-hosting towards arbitrage, because one thing that I do like about arbitrage is that it kind of gives me more autonomy and more control over the business, where if I want the beds to be made a certain way, like the landlord isn't telling me how to make my beds, or the landlord isn't telling me, how to do certain things. So I think that was something that I struggled with co-hosting in the beginning. But now that I'm starting to pick up a few more co-hosting units, now I think I've gotten a lot better at like setting those boundaries and kind of setting those expectations with the landlord. Has that been a struggle for you at all, like dealing, like partnering with these landlords, and basically just having to deal with their expectations and their
Yeah,
wants?
I think you have to be extremely clear upfront. Like I wrote up in a co-hosting agreement that spells out their responsibilities, my responsibilities. I think there is some gray area um, about the business, but it really is more of a partnership, like I mentioned earlier, where you have to really uh, know that you can work well with this person and they care about their property, and that like making the beds a certain way is not going to be a problem. I also think that what the co-hosting really is like you're like a marketing specialist, because this whole business is really marketing. Like that's like a lot of it. Obviously, it's the relationships you have with your guests. But I think a lot of it is really the marketing, and if you can excel at that, you'll do uh, really well. So I kind of have the agreement saying that my responsibility is to market the property, and I could talk about kind of what I'm doing to market them.
Yeah, please do.
I have like 7 different lead sources where I literally am on every single platform possible. So I think Airbnb is like number 1. That's about 50% of the people that are booking. And then there's Verbo. I do Verbo, even though sometimes you don't really get a lot of leads from them, but I've had good leads that pay a lot of money for properties, because Verbo will come up on like booking.com. It can come up on Google. Um, so I think those are big. And then I
That's
have a
interesting.
Google.
With Verbo, I just have a question on
Sure.
that, because I don't use Verbo because I find it to be super like user unfriendly. Like I just find how how have you struggled at all with like the interface and with that, or do you have a channel manager as well to connect the Airbnb and Verbo lists?
Yeah, I don't have a channel manager. I'd like to get one. It's hard because the rest of the places that I'm getting my leads, they don't really sync up all together.
Yeah,
So
they're
I'm
not
having a hard time.
OTAs. Airbnb and VRBO are OTAs. Everything else is like just listing sites, so they're different. OTA is
Yeah.
online travel agency for those who don't know.
Yeah, I don't well, the thing is, I remember reaching out to you and you were saying you didn't use Verbo at the time. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's a pain in the ass to me.
when I got my first property in July of last year, I wanted to be on every platform. I wanted to make sure I have a tenant. And my first guest was from Verbo. It was this,
Oh no way.
and the other guest that I had was from apartments.com. Like people that are in the midterm rental business, they're only on Furnish Finder and Airbnb, but you should be on everything. It can be a little exhausting, but you should, because Verbo and Airbnb, or sorry, I meant to say Zillow and apartments.com. Those are platforms that really midterm rentals aren't on. but and it's not really a midterm rental platform at all. But there's people out there that think that they can get midterm rentals from those websites. That's not a thing. But those people that think that, they're going to go there and you're going to get leads from there. Like one of my first guests was like a 6-month booking from apartments.com. No, there's no midterm rentals on those long-term rental websites. So I think
That
definitely put your listings on there.
that makes a lot of sense because you can be basically the only midterm rental or one of the few midterm rentals that's on that listing site. You're going to get basically all the leads for that area from that site. So you mentioned 7 sites, and I'm sorry I interrupted you. What are all 7 sites that you're listing on?
Yeah, so Airbnb, Verbo, and then I think I have a Google page. I think that's getting me leads. They're just like I have like it's free. Just make a put like your
Like a
address
Google My
on.
Business?
Yeah, Google, like on Google Maps, whatever. Like that gets me leads. And then Zillow, apartments.com, Furnish Finder, which I personally don't even think Furnish Finder is that great, which is really funny because that's like what everyone talks about. I think it's because maybe a lot of my properties aren't like what Furnish Finder is like. I think good for properties that Christian has, where they're like $1,600 for like studios. Some of the properties I have in the suburbs, like people aren't looking at Furnish Finder. So I don't know about Furnish Finder. Like I think it's still worth paying for it to get people on there. And I have a few listings on there. And what I'll do is when people reach out to me, I send them the whole portfolio and then they can see all the properties that aren't on Furnish Finder. I shouldn't say that. I have leads from Furnish Finder. Furnish Finder is, I don't know. I don't love it.
I hear you. I hear you. So that's 6, and what's number 7?
So the rest are
Apartments.com?
probably like the insurance companies. There's a few of
Ah,
those, and then
of
like word
course.
of mouth, I think is a big thing. Just like shaking hands with people and telling people about what you're doing, and I think that would be like the 7th.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm not on 7 sites, I have to say. I think I'm mostly on Airbnb, Furnish Finder. I am on Zillow, and then obviously I list all my properties with the insurance, not insurance companies, but the insurance housing specialist companies. Um, and then besides that, I do get lots of like referrals and word of mouth bookings. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That you're doing apartments.com, all those other listings. I mean, I guess the more that you're on, the more leads you're going to get. I just find that at scale, it becomes a little bit. I mean, you have to find a way, I think, to automate it, or at least have someone else taking care of it for you. Because I do find at scale it becomes exhausting when you're on all these different lead sites and you're getting leads from all these different places. Especially if it doesn't all feed into like one place, it can become a bit exhausting.
I agree, but if you're just starting out and you have fear, which most people do, like just go on all of them. Like if you
Yeah,
like,
that makes a lot of sense.
I had the luxury of having the time to do that. Like this is what I'm doing 24/7. Not everyone has that. So if you don't, just go on Airbnb then, because that's where most of the bookings come anyway. But if you're nervous, go on all of them. Another thing I'll do is like at the end of all of the listings, they'll say like the business name, and then like it's like 716 Corporate Housing LLC, Buffalo, New York, furnished homes, and then people will Google that. So if you put your business name there, they'll Google you, and then you can take some of your bookings off of Airbnb, which you have to be very careful about because Airbnb is an extremely fragile website. You don't want to mess around with Airbnb. They will kick you off, and that's probably where 50% of your revenue is going to come from. So be very careful doing that. So I implement that at the bottom of the listings, and I get a ton of people finding me just by Googling that name. They'll find me through many different platforms, find my number or email, and email us.
100%. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Airbnb is very yeah, you don't want to be sending phone numbers or sending email addresses over Airbnb unless a booking has actually been made. Now there are some ways that people can have found to like tactfully get around that. And what Jonah just mentioned is like he actually just has his company name in his Airbnb listing. And by doing that, people can find his listing on Airbnb and then Google his company name and then contact him directly that way. But you're never actually reaching out. You're never like messaging a guest and saying, "Hey, call me directly at this number," right? Because Airbnb can ban you at that.
Yeah,
So
don't do that.
yeah, don't do that. But okay, but you can give them your company name, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, no, that's cool. That makes a lot of sense, dude. So one thing you mentioned is you're doing this full time already. What is like your background? Because I know you're young, you're 23. Like what other work experience do you have? Like, are you like this is what I'm curious, right? Or I'm sure the other people are curious. What is your? Are you like going to school to be a doctor or what's going on?
Far from it.
You're
I
obviously
want to
smart,
serve. I'm
huh?
trying to serve the doctors. I want to serve these higher end professionals that are going to school for many years and making a lot of money. Those are the people that I want to serve. But I'm far from studying medical stuff. My background is, well, I graduated in 2020, but like in
Graduated high school?
high school, yes, I graduated high school in 2020.
Okay.
Um, I in high school and like when I was younger, I would just like buy and sell iPhones. It was very similar to this arbitrage thing. I would sometimes not even fix them up and I would just like flip pretty much anything I could come across, shoes, whatever I could. And I was always just hustling, making money. I started actually in fifth grade, like buying and selling stuff on eBay.
No
Um,
way.
yeah. So I've been like hustling and doing stuff like this for a long time, but nothing very big. It was always like small scale and then eventually I started like reading books and listening to these people and they were talking about this real estate thing like okay, this is where it's at. I need to be in real estate. I love dealing with people. So I kind of wanted to be in this like real estate hospitality field. And then I thought property management is kind of where I need to be because I like dealing with people. And then eventually, after like meeting Christian and hearing about this whole like arbitrage model, I'm like, okay, that's a low barrier to entry. Like I started this with $2,000, and I took that money out within like if like we were making money before we even paid the landlords. Like we were cash flowing immediately because of like how we structured our
Because
very first.
why you negotiated free rent up front?
Yeah, 2 months of, well, actually, that property, no, I didn't. But now for the future, what I was doing is 2 months of free rent. That property, I did 15 days free, um,
Well, that's still
because
great. Two
yeah,
weeks free rent for your first property. My
mhm.
first
And it
property,
was
I paid
furnished.
full month's rent. I didn't even know you can negotiate rents. Because that's not common knowledge. Most people, you don't just negotiate rents, right? So I paid full month's rent, full month's security deposit to move in, fully furnished the place. I actually, to get my first arbitrage deal, I actually offered, I don't know if I ever even told you this or told anyone this. I offered to paint the apartment like for the landlord because the place desperately needed a paint job. And I was like, dude, I'll paint it for you. And like I literally bought the paint, like physically painted the apartment so that I can convince this landlord to let me rent this place. Um, and again, I just didn't like. I was just excited to get started, and like I didn't know much better. So that's I mean, to be able just to get 2 weeks on your first property is actually pretty decent, and you
You
didn't
got to
have to
do.
paint or anything.
Actually, well, that's funny you say that. I did. Like you have to do stuff like that when you're first starting out, and then eventually you're like,
Yeah,
I'm not doing that stuff. You have like
yeah.
I went above and beyond to get the first few places, and I worked overtime. I painted a hall because I didn't like the way that it looked. Ownership paid for it, but um, I think you have to do that. You have to. Um,
I agree 100%. When you're first starting out, a lot of times you really do just have to make concessions and just show that you're willing to go above and beyond to to like make your first couple deals happen. And then once you start rolling and you start to build a reputation and you start to have a little bit of portfolio to show for yourself, then you can start turning it the other way and start negotiating concessions for yourself. And landlords will start to actually call you and they'll want to work with you. And you have to tell them, well, to work with me, you actually have to give me this, this, and this. right? But in the beginning, 100%, it's like, dude, sometimes you just have to give concessions and be willing to maybe not necessarily pay more money, but you're willing to offer some value in another way. You're willing to paint the apartment. You're willing to do whatever it is, just to get that first deal going and start to build your portfolio.
Yeah.
So guys, please feel free to start asking questions in the live chat. Jonah and I are here to answer any questions that you guys have. Rob asked, will this be available later to watch? Yes, this is recorded and it will be available to watch later in the group. You just come into the group and you should be able to find it to watch later. This is also a good time to mention that if you want to learn more about growing your midterm rental business, whether it's through owning property or with rental arbitrage and or co-hosting, I do have a super affordable coaching program. It's currently only $149 a month. We do weekly live Q&A calls every Saturday where you can ask me direct questions specific to your business. Jonah's on those calls every single week as well. And you also get access to over 80 video modules when you join this program. So my assistant will drop the link right now in the comments so that you can learn more about the program. Just click that link and there should be some videos for you to watch to learn more about the program. And you can also schedule a free 15-minute call with me to see if this program is a good fit for you. So guys, go ahead and feel free to put in any questions you have into the chat. Wow. So Jonah, so you mentioned, so basically you have very little like actual, I guess, work experience, right? As far as like corporate experience. So it's really cool. It's really like you know, it is kind of a testament to say like, I think anyone can kind of do this business. And my background's the same, right? Before doing like midterm, short-term or midterm rentals, dude, I dropped out of college. I was serving at a restaurant. I worked for a construction company for about a year. I hated that. I was not good at it. And I did end up working for a bank for about a year. So I bounced around and did a couple of different little things. And actually between that, I tried a whole bunch of different things. I literally, dude, I got licensed to sell life, health, and disability insurance. Didn't really like that. I got licensed to to sell real estate as a real estate salesperson. I did that for about 2 years. I liked that more, but ultimately this midterm rental thing just was the thing that I ended up really falling in love with, I think, and I felt was like the biggest opportunity for me. So I ended up sticking with this. But besides all those little things, like I didn't have like, you know, I'm a college dropout. I wasn't like I don't know, like a pharmacist or anything before that. So it is a testament that anyone can really do this business. Yvette asks, how did you secure your first lease as a new LLC at the multi-unit? What did you have to provide?
Yeah, I think number one thing is when you're first starting to pitch landlords is you have to talk like you're already doing this. You know, never. I would say to not say that you're brand new to this or you're trying to do this. I would say that, hi, my name's Jonah Christakis. I house travel professionals that are coming to Buffalo, New York. Oftentimes they're travel nurses staying with us for 3 to 6 months. I think your property would be a great fit. So I think that's number one. And then the LLC, I don't think any of that really matters. You'll sign whatever lease they have you can do it in the business name, and then you could write up an addendum saying that whatever special terms you want, like you want to be able to sublet the property or this type of like what you can spell out exactly what you're doing and have the ownership agree to it, because it needs to be a very transparent thing. You want to tell them
I think in your case, you did already have a relationship with the first landlord that you started to work with. You started at like managing his property for him basically as a long-term rental, and then you basically convinced him to let you become the tenant and you run it as a midterm rental. Is that right?
Yes, but I before I even started that property, I went to tons of properties. I would go to
Uh,
like I would go on Zillow and I would just see everything. The thing is, a lot of these properties aren't fitted for what we're doing. Like it's not like
mhm.
there's a majority of landlords are going to want to do this. Like it's going to be music to their ears. Guaranteed rent, long-term lease. You're going to care for the property more than anyone else. I believe that you should actually pay under market for these properties. Christian thinks you should pay market, which I think is appropriate, but I don't think you should ever pay more. I think if anything,
I agree with that for sure. You shouldn't be paying
you should
more.
pay less because you
Maybe
like
so. Maybe you should. I think you should be paying. I agree. You're right. You should be paying under market rent. Really, that is where
yeah.
the arbitrage. It's really similar to almost like flipping houses, right? Where it's like a lot of times when you make money on flipping houses, it's actually when you buy. Like you have to buy under value, then you flip you whatever you renovate the property, and then you sell at market rate. So you're right. We're not flipping houses, but we are flipping leases. So it does make we're flipping leases, right? So does I agree that you should be negotiating under market rents. I guess I say I rent at market rate, but I do negotiate free rent up front. And so when you annualize that, if you say for in my case, I get 2 months rent free. So if I annualize the discount that I'm getting on that 2 months rent free, I think that's a 13% discount on that first year of rent. So that's how I look at it. Yvette asked, what's your average cash flow per unit after all expenses?
Well, the arbitrage, I do an 80-20 split. So out of all the revenue I bring in, it's 20%.
I mean the
And
co-hosting. You
yeah,
said
for
arbitrage. So
yeah,
co-hosting,
sorry.
you're charging. Okay. Sorry,
Yep.
start over.
Co-hosting where it's more of a partnership with the landlord and I'm basically marketing the property. That is I do an 80-20 split, which is 20% of all of the revenue each month goes to me and all the expenses the landlord pays for. Now for the arbitrage, it's about like if you're renting the property from the landlord for 1,000, you're probably going to rent it out for 2,000. It's probably around 500 to 1,000 depending on the property. I'm very conservative when I'm doing the numbers. I'm looking at a bunch of comps, looking at all of the comparable listings throughout the city, and trying to make sure I have enough spread so I'm always making enough money. But I think the goal is probably around 500, and sometimes if everything's going well, it could be actually up to $1,000 a month.
Per month. Do you mind giving us like a specific example? Because I'm sure a lot of people want to hear like
Sure.
your ones that I know you have in Amherst, right? Like what is your rent on that?
Yeah.
I think you have two of them. What are your rents on those that you're
Yeah. So
paying?
that one's 1250 per month for a one bedroom apartment. And
Okay.
I'm paying utilities for that, which is Wi-Fi, electric, and gas. And then
Okay.
ownership pays for the rest. And then I rent that out for around 2,600 per month. So the
That's
spread on
actually
that,
incredible.
and
It's
then the
more than what
owner.
you just said.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be give you realistic numbers here. I mean, when you're doing the numbers, you're gonna probably try to do something around $500, a realistic $500 per month. But things happen, properties
Yeah, of
go vacant,
course.
so
Yeah, so
you
yeah,
have
you have
to
to
be
set money aside for things like vacancy or sometimes damages, or you have to replace things and you have unexpected costs that come up. But so in that case, you said you have a one bedroom apartment, you rent for 1250 plus utilities. So
Mhm.
all in, would it be fair to say, is it 1500 maybe all in, or
Yeah,
1450?
yeah, probably might be a little bit less. I split the internet with the unit right above. That property was
Okay,
furnished,
great.
partially furnished by the owner, and I put a bunch of stuff together that worked. Don't throw a bunch of stuff together. Don't do that. Don't take stuff from your grandma's house unless it really works well together. You don't want it to look like that.
Of course.
But that property, I put a bunch of quality stuff together. So I maybe only spent $1,500 furnishing that property because I took
Holy
stuff from my
smokes.
mom's house, my grandma's house, and source stuff from different places.
Sure. So yeah, you were resourceful in the
Yeah.
beginning. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, that makes sense. So you're all in like a little under $1,500 on that property, and you have it rented out currently for 2,600.
Yep. Yeah. It probably
That's
goes from like 25 to 27. But
sure,
I don't
depending on the
know.
season.
Things can change. I mean, we'll see,
Of
but
course.
probably going to be around that.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I hope that answers your question, Yvette. Yvette says, thanks for your responses. Did you have to finance furniture?
No. So I think one very interesting thing is when you're looking for properties, go to Zillow, and then if you go to like where you like look about how many bedrooms and stuff, there's a section that you can type in like certain words. Type in furnished and then press enter. Okay. And they'll show you all these properties that are like furnished. And people will, for whatever reason, landlords have like these properties that are semi-furnished for odd reasons. Sometimes they're like short-term rentals that aren't performing. There's all situations why there's furnished or semi-furnished places on Zillow. So those properties, those are the ones I'm kind of go towards because they're already kind of set up, already furnished, and um, there's a lot of value that you can provide there. So to answer your question, I haven't never financed any furniture. Starting out, I did like these Chase business cards that was like zero APR, which I didn't necessarily need to do that. I had enough money in my personal side to be able to furnish a place that's like $5,000, but I did that just to kind of get ahead, get some of those credit card points. But I didn't technically uh, finance them. I kind of just sourced
You put them on
furniture.
a, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
and then
No, it's
one
not.
of the properties. Go on.
Go ahead, bro. Sorry. I'll shut up.
I like the third property that I got was already furnished. Like, why did the landlords furnish it? I don't know. Like, you're not gonna be able to rent out a furnished apartment on a 12-month lease. Like, I don't know what they're thinking. And then like a lot of the properties I found were like short-term rental hosts that were just failing, or I've had owners that like the co-hosting um, partnerships. I've had actually them furnish the property. So you can get so creative. You don't need to go from scratch. Go look and see what's on Zillow, see what's out there, and shake hands and see who needs help. And there's so many different ways to go about it. I've yet to like get a vacant property and furnish it head to toe without like having um like furniture, I guess. Like
Oh,
I always like I have a place where I source furniture. I just have a bunch of furniture in a room. Like whenever I see an opportunity to get furniture, I'll put it together. It has to be quality though. Don't buy any garbage. Don't buy IKEA. Get nice quality stuff because it's gonna break.
wow. Okay. So you mostly only rented like apartments that are partially furnished, or in one case it was already fully furnished, and they were looking.
Mhm.
So they fully furnished a property and were hoping to find a 12-month lease.
Yeah, I mean, there's landlords out there that are just like they're good at like doing an analysis on buying a property, but then when it comes to like marketing the property, like they're just doing all weird things. It's like I don't know. I don't know what some of these landlords are thinking. But yeah,
Well,
there's
yeah.
properties.
Well, it makes sense. Sometimes it's like what comes easy for one person doesn't come easy for another, right? So what might be easy to you, like on like how to market a property and how to effectively market and get like midterm bookings might come easy for you, but it just doesn't come easy for other people. So um, and Yvette, so I've never, I mean, the way that I've financed furniture is that the same like what Jonah mentioned is I signed up for like a business, like I'll sign up for a business credit card, put the furniture onto the credit card. Usually, I'll sign up for a card that has like a sign-on bonus of like a 0% APR sign-on bonus. So there's no interest for the first 12 months. So you can buy furniture on that card and then pay it back as long as you pay it sooner than 12 months. And every time I do that, I have the money in cash. Like I'm not like borrowing money that I don't have. Like I have the money, but I put it on a credit card first. One, because I get the points. Two, a lot of these cards, you get like like there's the Chase Ink cards. I think you spend $6,000 on it, and you get a $750 cash back bonus. So I mean, 750 is nice. The way I look at it is like basically you're getting I think 12 or 13% discount on all your furniture just because you put it onto a new Chase Ink business card. Plus, it's 0% interest APR, so you can pay it off over a couple months if you want, or you can pay whatever, however you want to do it. Actually, and another thing I've done once is I actually had a landlord when I took on 7 apartments at one time. This was a couple years ago, and I actually didn't have the money at that time to furnish all 7 apartments at once. So I actually had the landlord basically loaned me the money to furnish these apartments, and then we just increased the rent to pay off that loan. So, like Jonah said, there's all sorts of ways you can get creative to be financing this furniture. But with that being said, it is 1:45. So thank you guys so much for hopping on the call. Jonah, thank you so much for being here and sharing your journey and sharing your insights. It was a pleasure to have you on. And again, guys, we'll be doing this every single Friday. I've got another great guest on for you next week, who I'm super excited to share with you all. But thank you guys for watching. See you all next week, and talk to you later. Peace.
Thanks.